I generally try my hardest to beat most of the games that I play. I mean, I literally have a podcast where I talk about beating video games, so it's clearly something that I've put a little bit of effort, a little bit of focus on. But obviously, I cannot beat every single game that I play. There's plenty of games where, I'm just really not feeling it. I have to drop the title at some point, move on to the next thing. And I think that is doubly true when I'm in the mood to do a little bit of trophy hunting. Certain trophy lists or certain games just aren't clicking with you in a way where you feel like you really want to push through and see that platinum. And so today I wanted to talk about 5 games I don't think I'm really going to go back to. I don't think I'll ever get the platinum trophy on. And what those reasons are. There's a pretty wide variety of reasons why I may or may not want to play a game anymore. And I think it'd be interesting to kind of talk through some of my rationale and show you some examples of games that I couldn't see the finish line on. Now, welcome back, everybody. Thank you for hanging out during this video. Before we get started, I do want to say a shout out and a thank you to my good buddy, Ari Louie, over on YouTube. Link in the description. Go check him out. He put out a video recently that was talking about 5 games that he may or may not go back to. And I really like the idea. He kind of left it open for video responses. So I thought I'd do a little bit of the yoink and twist. And instead of doing 5 games I may or may not go back to, here's 5 games I'm pretty sure I won't go back to, especially to get the platinum trophy. And as we dig in, I think you'll understand why, and maybe agree with me, maybe not. If some of these are games that you have done some trophy hunting on or that you've played all the way through and you really like, let me know, because I'd be curious to hear, kind of the counter opinion, right? Some of these are pretty set in stone, but others, maybe I'm missing something, or there's some aspect of the game that just clicks with people that didn't click with me at the time. Yeah. I think that could be a good one. So without further ado, we won't delay things. I'm going to get right into the first game here, and that is a little known game called the Metronomicon Slay the Dance Floor. So this is the physical copy. It came out via Limited Run Games. On the PlayStation 4, obviously. And Metronomicon has a really exciting premise if you're kind of just told it with no other context. And it is a rhythm game RPG, which seems like squarely in my wheelhouse. Folks that have come back to this channel multiple times know that I really love rhythm games. I get very into them. There's a couple that I really love and play pretty much daily, and others I always enjoy being a bit of a tourist in and doing some score chasing for a while and moving on to the next one. But rhythm is one of my favorite genres of games for sure. And then RPGs are another thing that I love, right? I'm always down for a good cozy RPG, a long adventure, and getting invested in a world and invested in characters and kind of seeing where that journey can take us. So those two things combined, it's like, wow, this seems ideal. This seems like the type of thing that I couldn't get enough of. But it's a bit of a monkey's paw situation. It curls a little bit because you realize that in order to do all those things, it has to do none of them well. It basically misses on every opportunity that each of those genres uniquely have. So the way that the game is structured, it's actually kind of more arena focused. And you just kind of like going through a series of battles. There's not much like overworld wandering or adventuring, things like that. It's almost exclusively the battles from what I recall. And what you'll do when you get into the battles is your characters will be lined up on one side, your enemies will be lined up on the other, and you'll have these different tracks coming down with different arrows that you press, DDR style or any rhythm game style. And you have to execute the inputs in order to do different spells, cast different abilities, do different attacks, all sorts of stuff. And the track moves between the different characters, a little bit like maybe Amplitude or something. And you're trying to just do battle by executing rhythm game moves to cast onto the enemy team or onto the group of enemies that you're fighting. And the problem with that, and I think the problem with a lot of rhythm-based, like, genre combinations, where they've put rhythm games into another genre, is that the rhythm game is never very good. Because they need the rhythm game to be serviceable to a wide audience, including a lot of folks that don't really play rhythm games, which usually means that the difficulty is tuned way down. It's very simple. It's very boring to play those charts. There's no real like skill. A lot of times there's not even any real consideration to the charting of the songs. And so that in turn makes the rhythm game aspect of things really not that enjoyable to play. I mean, you do get to press buttons in time, but there's none of the nuance that makes a really good rhythm game special included in games like this a lot of times, and I would say that that is especially true in this case. And then on top of that, on top of kind of the failings of the rhythm game side, I also think that the vibe, the sort of tone of the story, it's very tongue-in-cheeky, it's very, it's trying to do a lot of wink and nods to the camera, it's very self-aware, and that humor just doesn't really land. Now, granted, this game came out, I want to say 2016 or something like that, so it was probably a little more era appropriate when it did come out, but it really was not landing for me when I played through it. And so that leaves me in this situation where I am not really enjoying the rhythm game, the gameplay, and I'm not really enjoying the story, so why would I continue on? Now, I will kind of give some context to my playthrough. I ended up playing this game co-op, which it's cool that it has co-op. I ended up playing this co-op with a friend of mine, and so maybe, we were kind of having like a weekend of playing games, and perhaps it just wasn't the right environment for a game like this, or maybe they do some tuning of difficulty or whatever in co-op. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't that fun. I want to say I want to give it another try, but in reality, I kind of don't. I think that I've sort of just established that this game isn't really for me. And sort of paradoxically, I think despite being a big rhythm game fan, I think most games that merge rhythm with other genres tend to not be for me. There's some examples of games that do it really well. I've heard a lot of good things about, Metal Hellsinger, or Crypt of the Necrodancer is a good example of a game that does that well. So it is possible. But, an example like Crypt of the Necrodancer, they've merged kind of the rhythmic aspect of it without the actual like charted song execution portion, which I think is the right thing to borrow from a rhythm game. So yes, Metronomicon, Slay the Dance Floor, certainly a game with a lot of potential, but one that I'm not going to go back to and spend the effort to get the Platinum Trophy on. Really did not click with me. All right. Next up here, and this one's a bit more of a tragedy, I would say, and that is To the Top. So this is a PlayStation VR game. It came out for the original PlayStation VR, and it's an awesome game. So you're wondering, what the heck? Why aren't you going to play it? Well, let me describe the game to you and see if you can kind of work out what the problem is. This is sort of almost the utopian vision of what I want a VR game to be. It is a very kind of Mirror's Edge-esque movement-based platformer. Think of parkour type wall runs and jumps and climbs and things like that, but on a grander scale than is really, possible for a human to do. Of course, there's times where you're jumping like dozens, if not hundreds of feet in the air. On occasion you get like a jetpack ability that lets you fly through the air. So in VR, taking these huge leaps, flying from like the top of a building and landing on this floating platform and wall running on it and leaping onto the next one onto a conveyor belt that launches you forward. Like, that is so cool. That is so much fun. That is like, it's obvious that that should exist in VR, right? It's almost like you close your eyes, you imagine what a good VR game would look like. That's what you land on. The problem that you get with this one is that, unfortunately, it makes me really motion sick. One of the great struggles of my life in terms of VR gameplay is I love VR as an idea so much. I think it is a medium through which games have a lot of potential, that especially unexplored potential to this point. I do think that it has a real possibility to be kind of a third pillar of how games are played, right? We have handheld gaming / mobile gaming. We have more traditional PC and console gaming, and I think VR would be a great third pillar that stands right alongside those other two. once there's been a little bit more time, money, and energy and a little more public focus on it. But tragically for me, I do get pretty motion sick when I play. And so especially a game where, you know, you're flying through the air like it's a roller coaster. You look down off the edge of those buildings, you take that jump, man, your stomach rises up. You feel it in the pit of your stomach. You're getting that sensation like you do at an amusement park. It is wild. And that is cool until, you know, 20, 25 minutes later, you start to get a little sweat on your brow and you're like, oh, I'm not feeling quite so good. And then, you know, 10 minutes after that, you're like, oh, my stomach starts to hurt. I should probably stop. And then still 10 minutes after you stopped, you're just laying back on the couch praying for death. You're just like, oh my God, what did I do? Why did I do this to myself? And so this is one of the few VR games that made me really, really nauseous. Now, I have heard that you can sort of develop VR sea legs, you know, get more used to VR type stuff. And then you'll get that nauseous feeling a lot less. So maybe somewhere down the line that happens, but I don't think my lifestyle really supports playing that much VR. I probably can't. I would have loved to get the Platinum Trophy on this, but unfortunately, it is not an easy one. You have to kind of collect a whole bunch of stuff, earn a bunch of medals. So you have to not only be able to play through all 30-something courses in this game, you also have to master them, which means replaying them multiple times, you know, executing things flawlessly, cutting off fractions of a second in your runs, things like that. Just the type of thing I love to do, but not the type of thing I have the stomach for in VR. But let me know if you have a PlayStation VR. I think it's of course it's on other VR headsets too, like Quest and stuff like that. If you've played this one, please let me know if it made you sick. Two, what your thoughts are on it, because it is genuinely an incredibly cool game and one that I wish I could get the platinum on. All right, number 3. This is a game that I'm not going to finish for a different reason than the first two, honestly, and that is Shiren the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune, and the Dice of Fate. So this is, I want to say, the 5th game in the Shiren the Wanderer franchise, which is one of the earlier, more hardcore, you know, dungeon crawler roguelikes. So probably a much more contemporary example of a game that plays pretty similar to this would be something like maybe the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, where these are top-down, grid-based dungeons, and you're navigating them, kind of you take a turn, the enemies take a turn, that type of thing. You're looking to find items, gear, and progress further and further into the dungeon. And then, of course, when you die, you lose everything. And this game in particular is pretty hardcore compared to a lot of modern roguelites, where, you know, you think of stuff like Hades, even Rogue Legacy. There's a fair number of systems in place to ensure that you don't lose everything, right? You're always making forward progress in your runs. You know, you're gaining currency that lets you buy upgrades that make you stronger. You know, maybe you're retaining some items but losing others, things like that. Shiren the Wanderer games are hardcore, all right? They are not kind in that way. You die, you lose all of your items, you lose all of your gold, you go back to level 1, and you have to start again. And so you have to really be patient and really be skilled in order to make your way all the way through this game. And then on top of that, let's say that you want to, you know, you like it, you get through it, you want to see your way to the Platinum Trophy, which is a very rare Platinum Trophy, by the way. Less than 1% of people have it. Not only do you have to stand toe-to-toe victorious against that difficulty, see it all the way through to the end, but you have to do everything in this game. I mean, you have to find all the weapons, all the armor, all the items. You have to fill every monster entry in the like monster encyclopedia in the game. You have to like truly find, discover, and do everything. And you know, these levels are randomly generated, they're randomly created. So you might go dozens of runs never seeing the one item in an area that you don't have yet, or you might never come across that one monster, and if you do, maybe you don't get far enough to save your game, so all that progress is lost. You know, you can't just save anywhere. And so you have to be extremely dedicated in order to successfully do everything. And as a result, I just don't think I'm up to the task. This is definitely a game that I can see myself going back to, playing some more, and maybe beating it, because I did play this back in 2016. I just sort of dipped my toe in. I did a couple of runs, said, yeah, I'll return back to this, and then I never really did. But I could see myself going back, learning the systems and pushing through that difficulty to get to the end, or at least pretty far into the game. I don't think that I could ever successfully get all the way through the game and collect everything. That's just way too much to ask. Trophy guides estimate somewhere between 200 and 500 hours to get the platinum on this game, and that's just, there's so many other games I could play in that amount of time. It's really not worth it for me. But a cool game, and one that is certainly worth playing. It's just intense if you want to do a little platinum trophy hunting. All right. My number 4 is a game that I don't have a physical copy of to show you. In fact, I don't know if there even is a physical copy available in general, but I will hop over to the trophy list so we can talk about it, and that is Unravel 2. So, folks that are aware of the Unravel series, or these Unravel games, especially the second one, will know that it has a little bit of a reputation. As you can probably tell from the fact that it's a very rare platinum. It's an ultra rare at 1.5. Unravel 2 is a co-op puzzle platformer. You play as these two yarn characters, incredibly cute. And you're working together, tying your strings together to navigate through these environments. It's a puzzle platformer. It's a pretty traditional puzzle platformer. You've played stuff like Limbo. You've played stuff like Inside. You're probably going to be able to make your way through this one. It's not super easy, but it's not like absurdly difficult. It's very much possible to play through and to beat the game, which you can see I did back in 2019. I did it all in one day, in like 4 or 5 hours. Again, I played this one with a buddy of mine. We sat down, we knocked it out. We felt really good about it. It's a great game. But if you want to go for the platinum itself, that is an entirely different story. If you look down at some of these rarer trophies, there's 2 types of trophies that are really going to be the roadblock for you. One is you have to beat every level without dying. Now, remember that this is a co-op game, so you have to work together to make sure that you're not dying. And while, like I said, the game is not wildly difficult, it's not super easy, but it's not impossible. It's relatively easy to stumble into just a silly, stupid death, right? And have to restart the whole level. And these levels aren't super long, but they also definitely aren't crazy short. You'll have to take 10, 15 minutes sometimes to play through them, right? Like, you can see the gaps between some of these trophies are like a half an hour in some cases. It'd be a little faster if you knew the levels, but still. So go through each level without dying. You'll probably be able to, kind of learn the levels, understand what's expected of you in that case, and it won't be too bad. But that's just to prepare you for the real challenge, which is getting these gold medal times. So you have to basically execute speed runs of every single level in the game and get the kind of the fastest possible time requirement for each one of them. And again, there's only 6 levels, I think. And so, it's a game that takes several hours to play divided by 6. That's how long each level is going to be. You have to really know your stuff. In some cases, you might even need to kind of cheese some of the objectives. You have to be on point in order to successfully get those trophies and meet those gold medal times. And what really makes this hard, and the reason I probably will never do it, is because it's a 2-player game. You need someone else who's just as good, who's willing to grind for those trophies and willing to learn the levels that intimately. You basically need a speedrunning co-op partner. And so I almost feel like it just would be unreasonable for me to expect anyone to care that much or to try to go for any of these. And so this is probably going to be one of those games where I'm just going to have to be content with the trophies I did earn, the good memories of my playthrough with a charming puzzle platformer. But the actual task of getting the platinum is just one I could never subject any of my friends to. I think that they would probably grow to hate me quite quickly if I did. So, heck, you got to beat all the bonus levels even in a specific time. So you can tell all these trophies are ultra rare. It's just not one that is going to be feasible for most people to do. So, that is why Unravel 2 probably not in the cards. And last, but certainly not least, we have one more game. This one on the PS5, a game I don't know that I'll go back to. This one's a little more up in the air, but that game is Cris Tales or Crease Tales. I'm really not too sure of how you would specifically say that first word in the title, but this is a game that has an incredible concept, right? And so this is another turn-based RPG. As you know, I love my RPGs. And the ideal is that there's a time travel component that you can execute in the battle system itself. And so you can manipulate time, past, present, and future, to add modifiers to your attacks and to damage enemies in creative ways. And so, a couple of examples of that might be you could go into the past, and this happens, in turn-based combat. You go into the past, and maybe you cast like a water spell, do like an aqua magic attack that deals damage to the enemy, and it also gets their armor wet. And then you can fast forward time to the present, and, in theory, dozens of years have passed in that time, even though it only took one turn-based RPG turn. And now their armor is rusted. So it's much less effective. They have less defense. It's harder for them to absorb your attacks. Or, maybe you go in, maybe in the present, you cast Bio. You cast a poison attack on the enemy. And so they are taking a tick of poison damage every turn. Well, you can go into the future, and a lot of time will have passed, and they'll take all that poison damage all at once. So suddenly it's like boom, it's like a big spike of damage that hurts them. And so there's a lot of potential in a system like that, right? You can think of a lot of other creative ways that might be executed on. But the problem I found when playing through it is that they really just don't experiment to find those other creative example, those other creative ways that you might defeat an enemy. Those two examples I gave are real examples in the game, but they're one of the only examples you play in the first 5 hours. And so you're in an RPG where the story is serviceable, but it wasn't really gripping me, and the combat is very repetitive, and you can really you can sense that it's sort of underserving the potential of the game. So I loved the art style, and I loved the idea. I was really excited going into this one. I bought this game day one. I was all on board. I was like, heck yeah, let's do this thing. And then after 5-6 hours, I just petered out. I just couldn't really stick with it. And so this is one where, a fair number of people have the platinum. It's got like 10% of people have it, so it's not ridiculously difficult. If you played all the way through this game, I would love to know, did it hook you right away? Did it take a while? Does it get more involved or more creative in the back half? Am I just kind of right before when it really takes off? I'm not too sure. But as it stands, Cris Tales was a fine time, but it just didn't grip me. And in a world with so many great games and even so many great RPGs that I've never played, it's hard for me to imagine carving out the time to go back and revisit one that I've sort of already made up my mind on in some ways. But, who knows what the future holds. There's always the potential for me to go back and visit and maybe reevaluate my thoughts on that. So there you have it. That is 5 games, 4 physical and 1 that we showed, that I will probably not be revisiting and will probably never get the Platinum Trophy on, despite them being on my account already. So, not trying to be negative, of course. I generally am very positive about games, but I think it's also sometimes interesting to talk through the ones that didn't land quite as well. And so I'd love to know, are there any Platinum Trophies or games that you just don't plan on going back to? You've started them, but you're like, nah, not for me. This game's not my thing. Let me know. Again, thanks to Relui for the idea, and thanks to all of you for sticking all the way through to the end of the video. Links to all my stuff is in the description. Appreciate you hanging out, and until next time, peace.